This week on Capital Connection, Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski joins the show to talk about all the craziness in Washington.
There are still places where we can work together, but we're just not seeing a lot of leadership out of this speaker.
And Congress kicked the can down the road on the Farm Bill, choosing to extend the previous version instead of passing a new one.
There's always nervousness when they don't extend the Farm Bill on time.
The Illinois State Police named their first female deputy director in the agency's history.
I was very surprised when they approached me with it, and I was very excited because it's such an amazing opportunity.
It's all coming up on Capital Connection.
From the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda, Capitol Bureau Chief Cole Hankey is asking the tough questions. This is Capital Connection.
Welcome to Capital Connection. I'm Cole Hankey. This week, we sat down with Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski to talk about all of the chaos in Washington and in the House of Representatives, the conflict between Israel and Hamas in the Middle East, and we touched on the Farm Bill, which Congress recently extended the previous version of the bill instead of passing a new one. Now, we go to our full interview with Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski. We are now joined by Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Cole.
So we have a lot to talk about. You've had no shortage of things on your plate here, no pun intended for the Thanksgiving week here. But let's start here. Conflict in Middle East. Recently, this has been a constant development, but just this week we saw Senators Duckworth and Durbin sign on to a letter to the president calling for more humanitarian aid to Gaza and calling on the president to ensure that the Israeli government is doing all they can to avoid civilian casualty, civilian damage in the area. How has your position on this evolved? Because we're over a month into this since those initial terrorist attacks in Israel.
Well, I will say I'm glad that the senators are calling out for more humanitarian aid. We have a crisis in Gaza as we're seeing women and children, innocent Palestinians, that are losing their lives in this conflict. And so I think calling for more humanitarian aid in this administration, to this administration, is really very important. I also have been very consistent in saying that we also need to be focused on the hostages. I think we potentially could be hearing some positive news about a temporary ceasefire that could lead to the release of some women and children that are currently held hostage by Hamas within Gaza. That would be a really welcomed relief for so many families that I've had the opportunity to visit with in Washington that don't know whether their family members are alive or dead in Gaza. And so we are dealing with hopefully what could be an encouraging step forward in a temporary ceasefire, but we really need a sustained peace in this area, and I think that's critically important. It cannot be lost as well that, I've been very supportive of Israel should maintain the ability to defend themselves. I think that's also very important, as Hamas has made it very clear that the horrific attacks that happened on October 7th will not be on their own, that there could be more attacks and will be more attacks coming. So this is a very complicated situation, but we do need to provide humanitarian relief, and so I'm glad to see that the senators are calling for more assistance in that regard.
I just want to make sure I clarify here. You said sustained peace in the area, and you've mentioned temporary ceasefires. Sustained peace, not necessarily sustained ceasefire. Are those correlated?
Well, I'm hoping that the news will come out. The president has been working very aggressively between Israel and also being able to get Hamas to the table to actually release these hostages. A ceasefire requires two parties. And so what is encouraging is that we're seeing that these two parties, with the president's leadership, we could see the release of some hostages in a temporary ceasefire. That's one thing. I think longer term, we do want peace in the Middle East, but as long as as long as Hamas is able to, attack Israel, as long as Hamas is there, causing complete chaos within the Middle East region, there won't be peace. And so what I'm looking for is something that is more longer term and sustainable.
So obviously, America has a extremely vested interest in this situation now because of the hostage situation that's ongoing. But how should America the U.S. continue to work in this space with, hopefully those hostages are freed and back home?
Well, this is the United States is really, I think they're leading in this area, making sure that Again, we're able to provide support to Israel so that they can defend themselves, but also providing humanitarian aid. We have to do both. That is both critically important, but staying focused on also the release of these hostages. Some of these are American hostages. And so prioritizing that, I think you're seeing in a very complicated situation, the president trying to lead on all fronts, which is really important. And also, I think you've seen the president call out, we want to make sure that Israel is abiding by international law as it relates to war. And so you're seeing him paying attention to what's happening in the West Bank, calling that out. And so, again, a very complicated situation. We all want to see peace within this region, but it is also very important that our ally, the only democracy within the Middle East, Israel, has what it needs to defend itself during this time as well.
All right, well, coming back stateside here, Congress temporarily avoiding another government shutdown again, and part of that was also the Farm Bill that we've had no shortage of conversations about, just extended. The previous version now just extended a year. If this keeps happening, what kind of confidence or lack of confidence does that instill in people, back in this district or across the country about what Congress can get done?
Mm-hmm. Look, we need a budget. I mean, these continuing resolutions really is just kicking the can down the road to keep the government temporarily open. Of course, we do not want a government shutdown, and I've been consistent in calling for, we need Republican leadership to actually lead to get us to the budget that the president had been discussing with House leaders and Senate leaders. There's a roadmap as to how we can get there and get a budget done. But right now, we continue to see these short-term fixes, and I think working people in Central and Southern Illinois deserve a government that can do much more than that, can actually get a budget across the finish line. What you saw before I came home from Washington is we also included a one-year extension on the Farm Bill. I'm glad to see that because the deadline was September 30th. So we were well past the deadline of an expiration of a Farm Bill. What this does in this next year is gives us the time to really get a bipartisan Farm Bill done. I think it's really important. A Farm Bill has always been a bipartisan piece of legislation. I've been working with Democrats and Republicans on a number of different initiatives within the Farm Bill. One, to support new and beginning farmers, how we can help give young and beginning farmers access to low-interest loans so that they can get into the agricultural space. But also I've been a strong advocate for more investments in agricultural research and innovation. This year and this extension will give us the time to kind of hash out more of those details to get a really good bipartisan Farm Bill done. But in addition to that, we got to get a budget done. We got to stop kicking this can down the road. For the Farm Bill, you say it'll give you more time. Mm-hmm. Farm bills get passed every 5 years. I know you haven't been there since the last Farm Bill was passed, but that's quite a lot of time to hash out some of these issues. And like you said, it's a bipartisan piece of legislation typically. Mm-hmm. We know the hang-ups, the SNAP benefits or, the cutbacks that some members of Congress want to see to this particular legislation, but are you really confident that another year is going to get it to that point where it needs to get done, especially when we're talking about an election year? Yeah, it is not atypical that a Farm Bill actually is extended. The last few Farm Bills have had extensions similar to this Farm Bill as well. So as I've met with my Agricultural Advisory Council that has members within Central and Southern Illinois, keeping them updated on the progress we're making, I don't think they're surprised by the extension, but what I'm trying to look at this extension is how can I advocate for the priorities for Central and Southern Illinois family farmers during this time to make sure we're getting the most that we can out of this Farm Bill to support our commodities, our corn, our soybeans, agricultural research. Again, I mentioned new and beginning farmers. That's a bipartisan piece of legislation that would be a new initiative within the Farm Bill that I'm hoping to get in there. So I'm looking to use this time constructively. It's not atypical that a Farm Bill gets extended, but let's get it done. Let's get it done, and let's get it done on a bipartisan basis in this next year. Obviously, there's been a whole lot of chaos introduced since the speaker battle started and has concluded, but I wonder what have you seen as far as the differences now that the new speaker has taken over, and what have you thought about the
last month or so?
Well, I do have concerns because the reality is the Republicans are in the majority in the House, and we haven't been able to see any real progress on a meaningful budget. Again, kicking the can down the road isn't a real solution to our budget needs for the federal government. We're also seeing a lot of political kind of grandstanding with different censure motions on different members. And I just honestly, I consistently say this, but really do believe the district that I'm so lucky to get to represent wants me to go to DC to be a part of solutions. So I'm very solutions focused. And in a very divided House, it can be challenging. But I do think, and something I'm grateful for, honestly, during this time, is that I can find some colleagues on both sides of the aisle to move things forward, whether it's in infrastructure investments, workforce development, agriculture. I'm honored to serve on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. There are still places where we can work together, but we're just not seeing a lot of leadership out of this speaker. And so I'm hoping that when we get back from the holidays, people will have taken a little bit of a break and we'll get back to the work of the people.
Well, when you get back from the holidays, that's also going to be, I guess, the official start to the campaign trail, filing day on Monday in Illinois. What I wonder, just as you're getting ready for round 2 on the campaign trail, has your outlook, maybe more of the specifics, changed at all? Are you taking a different approach this time around to what you did before, now that you're an incumbent and you've had some time in Congress?
Yeah, well, so I'm looking forward. I'm going to be filing my petitions on Monday with everyone at the Board of Elections. And the way I'm looking at my re-election campaign is just talking about the issues I've been fighting for working families throughout central and southern Illinois, whether it is having the opportunity to work on the House Agriculture Committee and advocate for our family farmers, advocate for biofuels, something that's really critically important within central and southern Illinois, advocating for sustainable aviation fuel. I'm a leader on a number of bipartisan pieces of legislation. Those are the things that help our communities. I've been a good partner to companies manufacturing, wanting to help find opportunities to bring more of those jobs back home to central and southern Illinois. And we've had a number of wins even in this last 11 months. I'm really excited. We're in Decatur. One of the things that the Economic Development Administration just recently announced is IFAB, which is a new potential bioprocessing and fermentation lab that'll go right here in Decatur. That's more economic development, that's more jobs. That's what we've been advocating for in my office to really deliver for people. And so those are the kind of accomplishments and priorities I'm going to be looking forward to talking about on the campaign trail.
All right, well, Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Cole.
When we come back, we sit down with Kevin Semblow, the Executive Director for Governmental Affairs at the Illinois Farm Bureau, to talk about the extension of the Farm Bill. We'll be right back.